about sport and politics, but I think it's more important that we maybe talk about legacy issues, because that's not covered in a very complete way in the book. So, but I've done a lot of thinking about legacy, read much of the studies on legacy, and Dora and I are working on papers related to legacy and mega events, and also some new material on non-mega events, smaller events, and how cities can use those events as a way to improve the infrastructure and make changes in the city that will benefit a greater proportion of the people rather than just a few people. So, in English, I don't know about the Portuguese books, but in English, these are two very good books about mega events and legacies. And one of them is written by Boria Majumdar from India, and he studied the Commonwealth Games, which were in Mumbai, and or in Delhi, not Mumbai, Delhi, and he did wonderful investigations, and so he was able to look at how much money was spent and who benefited from that money and what the legacy was for the Commonwealth Games. And there's an independent journalist in the United States. He does not work for any media company. I donate money to him so that he can do his work, and other people do the same, because he is completely free to speak what he finds in his investigations. There's no corporation that might censor what he says or ask him to change things. So Dave Zirin came and spent quite a bit of time in Brazil. He had good contacts in Brazil, and he wrote this book, Brazil's Dance with the Devil. And the devil is the IOC. And and FIFA. So he is looking at the World Cup, the Olympics, and the fight for democracy. But he's got very good information in there about what's happening in Brazil. So what you have had already, you've had a multi-billion EI party, and now you're going to have another one. One of the big issues is what happens in connection with those big parties, the big mega events, the World Cup and the Olympics, because you're spending very much money on those two mega events. And if you look at the bid document, which Barbara has done, there's a section in the bid document that says that the Rio 2016 Games will contribute to the transformation of the city. And it will have a major impact on Rio. Using the sport facilities, all the infrastructure already in place and improved before the Games, and ensuring a sustainable legacy for the city in the future. There will be significant social gains, for example, with programs aimed at integrating young people and poor communities. And that's what I want to emphasize. There will be changes in Brazil. There will be a new metro. There'll be many new facilities, 56 new facilities in Rio related to different sports. Some sports that are not played in Brazil. But so there will be major changes. There's going to be changes. There's already changes at the airport. There's changes in some of the other transportation infrastructure. But in the bid document, it says that there will be changes that will benefit young people and poor communities. And that's where I think there will be some problems, because I have not seen or heard people talk about the kinds of changes that will benefit children and communities yet. So I know that Mazadre, Fernando, wants to develop some programs that will have an impact on children, but I'm not so sure that it will have an impact on poor communities. So, for example, when we were at the Olympic Park last Saturday, we saw the old swimming pool, from 2007, from the Pan American Games. And one of the things that they said about that stadium is that after the Pan American Games, it would serve the local community. From what we heard, there is not one person from the local community that has been able to benefit from the pool being there. So some of these things that are said in bid documents don't come true. They're things to make people happy about the bid and about hosting the event, but so they serve a political purpose, but they don't necessarily lead to a particular legacy. And when we talk about legacies, legacies don't just happen automatically. Okay? And this is what many people assume. They assume that if we have this big event, there will be these things that happen automatically. And my point is that this is sport mega events, SMEs, okay? SMEs involve struggles, okay? Debates, negotiations over what is considered a legacy. What is a legacy? How do you define it? Who defines it? How are legacies prioritized? Which ones are the most important and which ones are the least important in the planning and the funding process? And then, this is the most important, whose voices and whose interests are represented at the table when people talk about legacies? Because usually it's just very powerful people in the national government or at the national level and at the local level who are at the table. They're the ones who put together the bid. They're the ones who define what a legacy is. They're the ones that will set priorities. And people from the local communities in and around Rio, the poor people's communities, the working class communities in Rio, those people were not represented at the table when the bid document was being written. So their voices were either ignored or only heard in the background through the ears of people with power and influence. So, so because of that, you can expect that the legacies that will occur are going to be more apt to serve the interests of the wealthy and powerful, and less likely to serve the interests of people in poor and working class communities. So, and that's not a surprise. It's just related to how legacies have been defined. So, the reality about a legacy is that usually when you have a mega event, the host city and the host country go into debt. That's universal. Since 1988, every host community and country has gone into debt, sometimes very, very significant debt. So, and after the event, the budgets are overspent and people are drained of their emotion and energy. To host a mega event requires an unbelievable amount of energy. And people are working long days, and legacies related to the common good under those circumstances are often forgotten. Well, we made these promises that we were going to build these facilities for young people or for this or that, the local community, but we're so tired now, and we don't have any more money. And so we really wanted to do this for you, but we can't now. So too bad. But meanwhile, there are people who have benefited from the mega events because they were positioned in a way where they could take advantage of the capital that's flowing, that will flow through Rio and through Brazil related to the Olympics. And there will be much capital flowing, much money that's coming through the city. But who will have access to that money? Who will be able to benefit from the way it's moving through the city? It's the people who are in powerful positions, who can take advantage of the opportunities that are afforded by hosting the games. So, so what happens is that sport mega events rarely produce promised or predicted outcomes, except for well-positioned people. And they are the ones that have access to capital, and they can create their own legacies. You know, that's how much power they have. But the general population usually does not benefit, except they have an opportunity to see the Olympics. They're proud of their country. They're presenting their culture to the rest of the world. You know, this is a nice opportunity. Brazil hasn't had this kind of an opportunity in the past that they've had with the World Cup and with the Olympics. The eyes of the world will be on Brazil. And that makes Brazilians feel good, even if they don't benefit directly in any material way from hosting the Olympics. So there's a good emotional feeling. But that good emotional feeling is very temporary. I mean, you know, it exists during the games and maybe for a week afterwards, but it disappears very quickly when people start to realize that now we are left with a massive debt and we will be paying for the next 2 generations to pay off that debt. And then their good emotional feelings start to fade, like they did in South Africa after the World Cup in 2010, when the people felt deceived. You know, they said that, you know, all the promises were that this is going to change South Africa, but not only South Africa, it was going to change all of Africa. And so people blew their vuvuzelas. They were really happy during the event, but then afterwards they see that they're $10 billion in debt. And you know, the people living in the townships, their lives are worse than ever. Actually, there's fewer jobs than ever. And they say, well, what about all these promises? And they felt like they were lied to, like they were deceived. And they protested afterwards. So, so basically, the historical pattern is that sport mega event legacy plans generally focus on reproducing and extending the power of capital. And what that means, these are the changes that you will see. There will be some business investments and some economic growth, but it's not known how much of that economic growth will filter down to benefit people who are just everyday workers. There will be urban regeneration and gentrification. So poor people will be moved, relocated. They say relocated, sometimes it's dislocated. And I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of people in Rio have already been relocated or dislocated. The number that I hear in the United States is 400,000. Does that sound big, small? Yeah, so that should be in the newspaper this morning. I mean, that's big news. If there are even 50,000 people being dislocated, that should be big news. If it's 400,000 people, that's massive news. So why are we not hearing about this in the media? So because some of the areas, some of the land on which those neighborhoods are located, in the past, it was difficult to build on that land. So people built their own houses. And they had some good experience because they were building the wealthy people's houses already. So they took some of that experience. They built their own houses on hillsides. But now that there's new engineering, and we can put $1 million condominiums on those hills. So it would be nice if we moved all of those poor people outside on the edge of the city somewhere, and we could take the land back by the city, and then we could sell it to a developer who is one of our friends for $1, and that's an exaggeration, but then that developer can put $1 million condominiums there, and then more people with money will live in Brazil, and the big business will be better, but meanwhile, the people who used to work in those areas around that neighborhood, now it takes them an hour and a half to get to work because they're in a house way far away from where they were before. So that's a problem. And the construction of the physical infrastructure, such as roads and trains and airports, all of that is helpful to a certain class of people. I love it. I go into a nice airport. There will be a nice train to go from the airport to the city. But I'm an upper middle class person from the United States. I should not be benefiting from. And maybe I'll spend some money in Brazil when I'm here, but it's not going to benefit the local people. And during the event, especially during the Olympics, all the local people who are the street vendors, who make their living selling things on the street and close to the 4 different Olympic venue areas, the IOC has police that will go around and say, you can't sell this because it competes with Coca-Cola. It competes with McDonald's. So therefore, for these 3 weeks, you go away. And that happens in London, it happens in every city that hosts the Olympics, is that people think that the local businesses are going to benefit, and in every case, the local businesses actually have less business during the Olympics than they have on a normal 3-week period. So the everyday business person is not going to benefit. Also, the interest in the well-being of the general population, that's part of the promotional narrative associated with the Olympics. And it's a common political strategy that people have used to gain public approval that will be used to justify the expenditure of public money. And public money is scarce in Brazil right now. And to be spending, they say, 22 to 35 billion dollars on the World Cup and the Olympics. And that's the conservative estimate. It doesn't take into account all of the extra money that's going to have to be paid for all the overtime and all the extra charges now that there's only 14 months and only 10% of the 56 venues for the Olympics are completed. Right? At this same time, in London, 80% of all the facilities were completed. In Rio, 10%. And right now, the big problem is, according to the articles I read yesterday, is that the contract for all the power cables that go to the venues, and you need big power, electrical power, that contract has not even been given out yet. No sign, it hasn't been signed, so you don't even know who's going to do it. And there are literally thousands of kilometers of electrical power lines that have to be put into the ground before some of the work can be done to complete the facilities. So So I'm not saying that the facilities are not going to be ready, but I'm saying that in order to get them ready, people are going to have to pay double what the original estimate was. And that's the problem. I think that, you know, people tell me, don't worry, you know, be happy. Everything will be ready. And if that's true, it will be because they spent twice as much money, at least, as they estimated to begin with. So that's the issue in Brazil right now. So basically, that would be great if there were all these legacies that the everyday people, that the general population would experience and have a positive impact on their lives. Then you're willing to pay some debt, right? But if you don't see any of the legacies, then you get upset. And you might say that we were deceived about what the Olympics would provide for people. So we know from research that legacies occur when they're planned, when they're funded, when they're organized, when they're connected with existing social structures, when they're integrated into people's lives. Right? So for example, there's going to be 56 new sport facilities in Rio. So right now, I can tell you that unless people are sitting down right now, and this is too late, actually, but if they are sitting down right now and they're figuring out who is going to use these facilities, what programs will go in them, who is going to run the programs, how are people, for what people will the programs be designed? Okay? How are those people going to have transportation back and forth from their homes to the facilities? How will those people be involved in the implementation of those programs and the maintenance of those programs over time? And how are those programs going to be funded? Unless all of those questions have been answered, there will be no legacies associated with those facilities. Okay? Legacies they're not magic. They just don't happen. So they have to be planned, and they have to be organized. They have to be funded. They have to be implemented. People have to be trained to run them. Users have to get to and from these facilities. And I've been to Olympic Park. You know, it's difficult for people in local communities in Rio to get to Olympic Park and get to some of the other facilities. So how is that going to happen? Because if you don't know now, it won't happen. So now, Fernando, he's one of the only people in the country who is even thinking about this. So hopefully, we can bow down in 5 years and we can say thank you for creating a legacy for young people, for example, who now can use some of these facilities and be inspired and have their lives be more positive. So increased sport participation, we've already talked, I think we talked about that a little bit, but all of the research shows that mega events do not increase general sport participation. Now, London did the best studies, and here's what they found. They found that of all the people who play sports, not everybody in England plays sports, but of the people who play sports in England, 90% of them maintained their sport participation or decreased it during and for 1 year. This is I've seen the 1 year data, I haven't seen more data. But they actually stayed the same or decreased their sport participation. But the top 10%, the people who are really involved in sports, They actually increased their sport participation a little bit. But that was only the top 10 who were already very physically active and involved, all right? So, and that's a pretty typical pattern. It's the people who are the really serious sport participants who are the ones most likely to be inspired and have the resources and have the opportunities and the existing relationships that they can actually increase their sport participation. But if you're a little girl, you're 10 years old, and you watch the Olympics, and you watch gymnastics, and you are inspired, and you do tumbling in your house and out in the garden, and you want to learn more skills, well, that's great. But that won't happen unless there are gymnastics programs that are ready to go, that are in existence, people trained to teach gymnastics, transportation for that 10-year-old to get to and from the place where the programs are. Because if those things don't exist, the inspiration will disappear in about 2 weeks. And then she won't be tumbling in the house anymore, and she'll be doing whatever she did before. So if you want to take advantage of the inspiration, you've got to have the infrastructure there in order for that 10-year-old to do what they would like to do. The educational benefits, some people say we can use the Olympics to inspire children to learn about other cultures, about, we can study different sports, and that will help them understand different cultures and how the world works. And in Brazil, Katia Rubio at the University of Sao Paulo, a social psychologist there, who's doing wonderful, wonderful work in sports studies and the psychology of sport and sociology of sport. She wrote a book that is for elementary school children so that they can use the Olympics to help learn. But on the cover of her book, and I don't know if I have a slide, she used the 5 rings. You know about this controversy, so I won't explain it. But if we're really serious about using the Olympics as a source of education, wouldn't you think that the Brazilian Olympic Committee and the IOC would tell Katia Rubio, you have done a wonderful job. Can we help print more books and get them into the schools and help teach teachers how to use the books and how to integrate them into their regular curriculum? We can help physical education and physical activity leaders in the after-school programs. We can help them use it. But unless those programs are already in place, then those things will probably not happen. Maybe here and there, but not generally, okay? This is the thing that will happen, I think. In most countries, what happens is that there's new high-performance training centers, there's new high-performance training programs, there's new high-performance coach training programs, and high-performance sports usually benefits when a country or a city hosts a mega event. Because they're in position to benefit. They can take advantage of the opportunities. And they can go to the government and say, if you want gold medals, now and in the future, we need more high performance. Now, the people here at UFPR, they know this. So in Fernando's proposal, he has a proposal that will say, okay, we should use these new facilities for high performance training. But you can't have a successful high performance training program unless you get young people involved. So we have to also create programs for young people. So maybe we can sneak those in the back door, not just the money for the high performance, but money to create development programs, sport development programs. And hopefully that will work. So some of you have seen some of these photos, you know, because people say, oh, the legacy will be all of the wonderful facilities, okay? So in Sarajevo in 1984, so that was a long time ago. But, you know, in Sarajevo they said, we're going to have all these facilities. Well, this is what the bobsled used to look like in 1984. This is how it looked 10 years ago. Okay, so there's Olympic Village. Okay, now Sarajevo is a unique case because they had a war. All right, so but I thought the Olympics were supposed to create peace. That's what they always say. But Sarajevo hosted the Olympics and then they had a war. So all of the facilities, all of the investments that they made were basically gone. So, but that was a unique case, okay? So those are the old ski jumps. Those, yeah, that were used during the Olympics. They were never used after the Olympics. And so Sarajevo was unique. This is Calgary, Canada, all right? This is where the ski jump spectators sat, and in 1988. So now it's all just crumbling, all right? And this is Athens. This is Olympic Park, 10 years ago. I mean, built 10 years ago with $12 billion, okay, of Greek money, and Greece is now bankrupt, but not because of the Olympics, but many things. But this is the Olympic Park today. So hopefully this will not, in 2026, hopefully this will not be a picture of Olympic Park in Rio. That's the kayak course. Okay, it has not been used. There's no water in it. There's been no water in it since the Olympics. So it's now just empty. That's the volleyball stadium. So it hasn't been used since the Olympics. It's now empty and falling apart. That's the softball stadium, empty. And the Olympic Village in Torino, 2006, they still have not rented, I don't know about today, but as of a couple of years ago, they hadn't even rented all of the apartments there that were part of the Olympic Village. There's beach volleyball in Beijing, so falling apart. There's the Bird's Nest, which is the most expensive empty building in the world, and most beautiful empty building in the world. Tourists go in and out, but little else happens there. And they did put an artificial ski slope in there, so, but I'm not sure it's still there.
No.
No. Yeah, now I don't have photos, I should have photos of the swimming cube, because I think the swimming cube is probably one of the success stories as a venue. Half of the swimming cube, according to Dora and others who have been there recently, half of it's being used for people sports. You know, there's slides, there's all, you know, there's a lot of water for people to swim in and have fun in. And then the other side of the swimming cube still has a competition, I think a 50-meter pool. And they have many scheduled competitions in that pool. So the facility is being used by the local community. It's being used by elite athletes. And we don't know about how the plans were made and implemented in Beijing because it's hard to get data from China, but it seems to be a success story, and it would be nice to be able to study it, to see why it's become a success, and because we could learn from their experience. Okay? One of legacies from the London Games is, and this usually happens, the biggest legacy is related to shopping, all right? And the biggest legacy related to the London Games is the largest shopping center in the world, at least in Europe, right? They say that maybe it's the largest one in the world. It's spectacular. And it's got a lot of high-end shops. There's people from Saudi Arabia who fly to London just to go. And Kuwait and Qatar and other oil-rich nations just to come and stay in the hotel and spend their money for 3 days in these wonderful, wonderful shops. Okay, so now there's other positive legacies in that area, the Olympic area in London, but what happened was that the property values around that area now have gone up so high that many people had to move out, and now wealthy people are moving in and they like to live there because it's a newly developed area. So that's a legacy, but it's not necessarily the legacy that a lot of people from London anticipate. Now, the swimming pool is there, it's beautiful. You can use it, and I've got some nice photographs. I forgot to put them in, but you know, the big swimming pool, I forget how many millions of dollars it costs to build that pool. But only about 30 people use it at any one time, 30 or 40, in a city of 9 million people. So you know, it's hard to say that that's a real positive legacy when so few people are using that venue. And London did have 2 stadiums that they built so that they could be taken apart and be used in Brazil. But Brazil didn't want them, so they're sitting in warehouses in England now. And so the other thing is that the Olympics cost so much money over budget that all of the youth sport programs, and by the way, England and London were the best, they had done the best legacy planning that's ever been done. I mean, 7 years before, in 2005, they started creating programs in schools for children to become more and more involved in sport. And I have a couple of friends who work in those programs. And they developed new forms of relationships between schools in particular areas. So physical educators with particular skills, started moving around from school to teach. And all of this was being coordinated, district by district by district, and then in the whole country. And they were creating a wonderful programmatic infrastructure for young people to be regularly involved in sport. Well, what was the year? When there was a government change and also a global economic crisis. And the new conservative government, given their ideology and given the global economic crisis, they said, no more money for that program. After about 4 or 5 years of people working very hard to create. And they not only said no more money for the programs, they said we're going to sell the public playing fields that are used by some of the school children to private developers so that we can get more money. So then some of the playing fields disappeared. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't some positive legacies for some children in England, but not anything like they had hoped. So, because there's so many unanticipated things, government changes, economic changes in your country and the world. And Sochi, $52 billion spent for the Winter Olympics in 2014. And that has had a major impact on the rest of the world because there used to be 6 countries bidding for the 2022, I think, Olympics, the Winter Olympics. And I forget which countries, but you know them, Aula?
Yeah.
Okay.
Norway, Poland. I think it was the 2 main that were actually presenting a bid. And
okay, yeah. So Norway and Poland were presenting bids, but when they saw what was happening in Sochi and what the IOC expected, they said, no, our people will not tolerate this. And the only 2 bidders left are Beijing and Uzbekistan? Yeah, Uzbekistan, I think Uzbekistan. Or, I can't remember, I should have looked this up, but there's political instability in the latter, and in Beijing there's no snow. So the IOC is worried now because if there's only 2 bidders, they can't make big demands. You know, if there's 6 bidders, they can make big demands and see who meets them. So what if no country bids to host the Olympics? Then we'll be in good shape, because a country that would come forward would say, wait a minute, IOC, instead of beginning with your needs as a basis for all of our planning, we're going to begin with our needs and the needs of our people. So we're going to use this event as a leverage to create positive outcomes for our people. And if you want us to bid, you have to accept that, IOC, because you don't have any other bidders. And maybe if there's another bidder, we can have a message sent over and say, you should take the same approach, okay? Because then you will benefit your own people. So, and that's the big, Dora and I are working on a paper, a legacy model versus a leverage model. And the legacy model begins with the needs of the IOC. The leverage model begins with the needs of the host community and what they need. So many people, many academic people are trying to get a switch from a legacy model to a leverage model so that communities are more likely to benefit from being a host. We already talked about this, and one of the issues I don't know about Brazil, but in London, this image was created by a street artist named Pure Evil, and it's on Brick Lane, and it's in the area kind of close to the Olympic venues, and a lot of the local people were not in favor of hosting the Olympics, and this shows that by one of the local children stealing one of the rings. But one of the issues in London was that there was some resistance to the game, and of course they were fearful for security reasons. And so London installed, they already had a surveillance system, but they installed the most sophisticated video surveillance system of any city in the world. And they also used 100,000 security troops to keep order during the Olympics. And I don't know how this is going to happen in Rio. And I don't know if Rio will install a surveillance system. Because one of the big legacies in London is people are being watched no matter where they go by the police. And they say, well, you shouldn't worry about that if you're doing everything legal. But a lot of people say that that's an invasion of my privacy, no matter where you go. It's almost like the TV programs we see, you know, where what is Letitia doing today? Well, we'll find out. You know, we'll use this camera, and this camera, and we can know what she's doing today. So, but I don't know what's happening in Rio about a surveillance system. Do you know?
Well, they are expecting to be the biggest security investment that Brazil ever had.
Yeah.
But I don't know exactly probably with surveillance. Like Rio, since the Pan American Games, they are having this intelligence surveillance. But I don't know exactly if it will get more than government.
Right. Yeah. So, okay, we covered that, and that's on YouTube. Am I going in the right direction? Okay. Yeah. So hopefully, the Olympics will stimulate the economy and generate employment. You know, that's a hope. Because, you know, there's global attention, and global attention makes it possible to brand and market Rio and Brazil in ways that hopefully will recruit wealthy tourists coming to spend all of their money in Brazil and Rio. And maybe it will attract corporations to locate their headquarters here, and that will create more jobs. Maybe it will provide additional revenues for new kinds of teams and in different sports that you don't have in Brazil. And maybe the local economy in Rio will benefit. But all of those things are maybes. They're not guaranteed, for sure. And they are most likely to happen if there's not big debt. Because if there's big debt, then people are not going to be willing to invest in Brazil. So we will see about that. So okay, the last issue that I want to cover it's related indirectly to legacy, and it's about politics in sports. And a lot of people think, well, sport and politics should stay separate from each other. But sports are by their very nature political, because they involve choices related to resources, choices related to what kinds of sports to have and play, and who can play them, under what conditions. So what qualifies as a sport? You know, like we were talking about esports, that's a big issue with the Olympics, for example. How do you get to be an Olympic sport? And I don't even know what what the criteria are now, but it used to be that you had to have an international federation. You had to have national federations for men, I think, in 40 countries. Yeah. And then you had to have so many championships, world championships that you ran before the IOC will even consider you as a sport. So what are the sports in the Olympics? They're the sports from England, mainly, because England colonized 2/3 of the world. And while they colonized 2/3 of the world, they took their sports with them. So they had sports all over the world. So which sports were in the Olympics? The sports from England and other Western European countries, and now from North America. Because these are the colonizing countries. They're the countries that have the resources to take their sports export them into other countries. So less wealthy countries have never had that opportunity. So their sports, their everyday sports, their folk sports, you might call them, they don't get included in the Olympic Games. So they are at an automatic disadvantage because these sports have not been part of their cultural traditions. Although, there's been, like Brazil, soccer came to Brazil, so it was imported here, but it's been here long enough now that Brazil claims it as their own. So, there's exceptions to that point. But, you know, this, a wonderful sport to watch, but it will never be in the Olympics because it's only played by about 6 countries in Southeastern Asia. And if you think futsal is difficult, oh man, this is only football, okay? And it's a small ball. And, you know, these athletes are unbelievably good, but and it would make a wonderful Olympic sport if you're interested in you know, spectacular play. But it won't qualify as a sport because of the IOC definitions. And okay, and then what are the rules of the sport? Who makes and enforces the rules? Who organizes and controls the events? All of those are political issues. And where will the events take place? Political issue. Who's eligible to participate is an interesting political issue now. And who gets the rewards? Always a major political issue. The number 6 is an interesting one now because so many people have connections with different countries. So, for example, I don't know if you saw the slide of the Russian women's basketball team, but the best player on that team is from Colorado State University, and from the WNBA, Becky Hammond is her name. She's now the first woman coach in the NBA, but she was getting a little old, and the U.S. said, we don't want you on our Olympic team. Well, she has a Russian grandfather, and she was able to use that Russian grandfather to qualify to play on the Russian team. And so the Russia played the United States. And when they played the national anthem before the game for the United States, here she is from Russia with her hand on her heart, and she's crying and because she loved the United States, but here she's playing on the Russian team. And another example like this is in American universities, on all the athletic teams in U.S. universities, there were more Olympians that played on countries other than the United States, on teams other than the United States teams, than the college athletes who played on the U.S. teams. Because so many athletes from other countries are training in the U.S. at American universities. So, so what's happening is, you know, we're finding that someone who has you know, a French mother and a father from Thailand, but is now living in the United States, or has residency in the United States and citizenship, but is going to school in England. You know, you can take your pick. What team am I going to play for? And what's happening is that some of the best Olympians on national Olympic teams don't live in that country, have never lived in that country, but they play for that country because where they're living now, they couldn't make the team. So, so when we say that the Olympics are representing, teams are representing countries, because of globalization now, that's getting more and more difficult to say, because countries are becoming less relevant. And some people say the big issue is who the sponsors are. And, you know, they make a joke. Well, maybe instead of having the United States against Brazil, we'll have Adidas against Nike. And we'll have corporate representation rather than national representation. But that's people just being cynical about the Olympics. So the conclusion is that all of these political processes are just part of the Olympics. And I think I'm getting tired, but I know you're getting tired, so I don't know if we can talk about the future, but the only issue that I would like to leave you with related to the future is that The future is not so much predicted as it is created. And that fits with the theme that I've been trying to emphasize through the last 6 sessions here, where sports are social creations. And if we want sports to be a particular way in the future, then we have to work to make sure that they become that. So we can create the future. And now, obviously, we have to form alliances, we have to know people with power, but if you have that in the back of your head, that it's possible to make change, then change is more possible. So, I guess my message related to the future is that we can reform sports, we can create new sports, we can transform sports, make some significant changes, even if we only do them at the level of people's sports. But that, in many cases, will affect more lives than trying to change the big prolific sports that have so many commercial interests and other power interests that make them difficult to change. So my advice to students always is, think of the sports that are part of your own communities, part of your own lives, and find ways that those sports can be changed. Don't worry about FIFA and the IOC. We're not going to change them. But worry about what's happening in your local communities. And in some cases, changes can occur at the local level. People start knowing about them, and then they inspire changes in other local communities. And that's the way change usually occurs anyway. Little steps. The big steps that we hope for, like the big changes in FIFA administration and elimination of corruption, I don't know how that's going to happen. There's just no system that exists to help those changes occur. And the only way FIFA and the IOC will change is if people stop going to World Cup matches and stop watching the Olympics because they've lost their integrity. But that's in the distance. So we should just concentrate on our local communities and people's sports. So this has been good for me to be able to talk with you. And every question that you've asked, I've learned a little bit more about Brazil and what's happening here. So I appreciate that and thank you for that. And I wish you the best luck in your studies. And not luck, but good fortune in your studies. And if you have some questions that maybe I can help you with at some point in the future, you can email me. Sometimes I can't give you an immediate answer, but sometimes I can give you some references to help you. So now we have a relationship, so it doesn't have to die if we don't want it to die. So again, I appreciate your listening to me for these last 6 sessions. Thank you.
I'd like to adopt some words. And of course, the thanks word to Aula. I remember when we went to Slovenia in Bled in 2008 to participate in the conference of EASS, and the keynote speaker was a Jay. And we saw the conference. I think about the Brazilians need to know this profession. In this moment, I think this impression. After the conference, I think I need to approach to Jay. And I saw Jay on the deck, I remember, on the deck, taking pictures. I said, I don't know if it's a good moment, but it's a unique moment for me. Then I approached to him and said, may I talk with you? Jay said, of course, it's very friendly, very amiable. And in this moment, we try to organize the first meeting of Aula in Brazil in 2008. Then we invited Jay to participate. Then Jay said, okay, I will. After this, we have, I think, 2 or 3 more opportunities to have Jay with us, but a short time. Just a lecture or a conference, sometimes with meeting with some students. But we have a dream. We have a dream in this moment. Because I thought, all Brazilians need to know this teacher, but not just a conference. For example, this moment we planned like 7 years ago. And today we have Jay here during 2 weeks. Then I would like sincerely, Jay, thank you so much for your patience, for your attention, for spending your time with us. Attention and everyone and the interest in the studies and the researches and the articles. So this is a simple words, but it's a sincere words. Thank you for your presence here and to become the dream in reality. Thank you so much. And I hope to have many opportunities in the future and to have you with us. Thank you very much. Thank you for and we hope to see you tonight.